Hi, how are you? I'm Mr. Muso. Today we want to talk about the 1792 war. We want to touch on a question on the 1792 war. Here is our question. The fear of exporting the French Revolution led to the 1792 war. The fear of exporting the French Revolution led to the 1792 war. So we want to talk about this question in a detail. So we see that this statement is true to a lesser extent. Why? It is because the Allied powers, they fear that the French Revolution was going to be exported to their own countries. Remember, these Allied powers, they were also despotic, like Louis XVI. Let's talk about them in detail. Number one, let's start with the Tsar of Russia. He was also a despotic leader. He was also an authoritarian. He was also a tyrant like Louis XVI. So that on its own clearly showed that it was going to be a possibility, there was going to be a possibility that the people in Russia were going to revolt against him. Let's move on and also talk about another leader. We talk about Francis of Austria. He was also a despotic leader like Louis. So there were chances that they were going to revolt against him. Let's move on and also talk about another leader from Austria. They were also despotic like Louis. So they feared that what was taking place in France was going to be exported to their own countries, leading to the revolution, a similar revolution taking place in their own countries. So what were they supposed to do? They're supposed to act. And how did they act? They were now wanting to come to France so that they could stop the revolution from continuously taking place in France. So the fear of exporting the revolution was so dominant, it was so important, it was so significant, it contributed to the 1792 war. But it was not only it was not only this fear that caused the 1792 war. There were also other factors that were also responsible for causing the 1792 war. Which were these factors? Let's talk about number one, the war-like mood. War-like, Wondo-like mood. What are we talking about here? We are saying that the clubs on the left, we are talking about the Girondists, the Jacobins, and the Cordillers, they started to move, telling people, mobilizing people, how are you, comrades? How are you, comrades? Viva, viva, comrades! Viva, viva, comrades! You know that the Allied powers, they want to come and attack us. What are you saying? Oh, we are going to be beaten. You are not prepared. You could be beaten. What are you saying? You don't know what you are talking about. Oh, I was playing. I was joking. We are going to win. So people were mobilized. People were forced. People now lived in fear, being intimidated, being forced to favor, to like this a war in the event of it taking place against the Allied powers. So because of the pressure, because of the fear, because of the force that was coming from the groups on the left, we are saying that the 1792 war took place. Why? It is because the warlike mood. People, when they greet each other, how are you? How are you? Pakadina ponas party say, are you a Wondo Tawina? First thing that is supposed to talk about is Wondo. When they are greeting each other, how are you? Whoa, yeah, whoa. So people, it was war and war and war. So their minds were now filled with war. So that on its own now, it created a warlike environment, a warlike mood, a warlike atmosphere. And eventually, we see the 1792 war taking place. It was because of this warlike mood that had been created by the clubs on the left. Then you move on, you talk about the character of Louis the 16th. Louis the 16th, we see that he was the leader of France. He was approached by the revolutionaries, by the clubs on the left. How are you, Louis? How are you? What are you saying? The Allied powers want to come and attack us. Are we going to win? Oh, Allied powers, you are going to win. But they could see that Louis wanted this war to take place. It is said by historians that Louis wanted a fast and a successive war to take place. Why? It is because he knew that the revolutionaries were not prepared, and in the event of a war taking place, they were going to be defeated. So you wanted this war to take place. So that on its own now contributed to the 1792 war. People were now saying, you are seeing the attitude, you are seeing the character of Louis. He wants this war to take place because he wants to restore, he wants to make sure that those powers that he lost, the veto powers, he was going to regain them. So let's fight, let's protect our country, let's do something, let's mobilize each other, let's come together, let's prepare for a war against the Allied powers. Why? It is because of the character of Louis the 16th, the leader of France. Then we also talk about the attitude of Mary Antoinette. Mary Antoinette, she was a sister of Leopold of Austria. So because of that, she sought advice. Budi, my brother, very serious problem. My husband, Budi, my brother, do something. We are suffering here. These people are troubling us. Budi, my brother, do something, do something. So because of that, now we see that the revolutionaries knew that the brother was going to assist what Mary Antoinette. There were chances that the brother was going to mobilize other countries and they come and assist Louis and Mary Antoinette. So that on its own, it also gave the revolutionaries pressure to fight, to mobilize and protect themselves in the event of being attacked by the Allied powers. So the attitude of Mary Antoinette forced the revolutionaries to fight against the Allied powers in the 1792 war. Then lastly, we can also talk about the issue of pressure that was coming from the ultra-royalist, the emigres. These were the people who fled the country when the revolution started in 1792. So what did they do now? We see that these people now, they were now putting pressure to the Allied powers. Do something. You attack the Allied, attack the revolutionaries. Do something. So that pressure that was coming from the ultra-royalists, from the emigres, it also explains why the 1792 war took place. It is because these people, they left their possessions, they left their lands, they left their assets when the revolution started in 1789. So they wanted Louis to be assisted so that they could go back to France and repossess, regain all those assets, all those positions that they lost when the revolution started. So the revolutionaries knew about that. So that on its own led the revolutionaries to mobilize, to bring people together so that they would fight against the Allied powers in the event of being attacked by the Allied powers. So that is what you can talk about on this question. Some even talk about the declaration of the Peonies, that it was also responsible for causing the 1792 war. It was because the Allied powers, they were given a final warning that we are now attacking, we are now prepared to destroy everything that we've been doing. That on its own again led the Allied powers to the revolutionaries to continue fighting against the Allied powers, leading to the 1792 war. So you can also talk about that. So we are saying that the fear of exporting the revolution is to a lesser extent. Then you talk about the other causes that led to the 1792. I've talked about the warlike mood. I've talked about the character of Mary Antoinette, the attitude, the character of Louis XVI. I've talked about the attitude of Mary Antoinette. I've talked about the pressure from the ultra-royalists or the emigres, and I'm also talked about the declaration of the Peonies leading to the 1792 war. Remember, the 1792 war took place during the time of the Legislative Assembly, the next government that came after the National Assembly. The first government that came was known as the National Assembly from 1789 to 1791. Then from 1791, it is this government, the Legislative Assembly, up to 1793. Then when it collapsed, another government came in the name of the Convention, the Reign of Terror, 1793 to 1795. When it collapsed, another government came in the name of the Directory from 1795 to 1799. Then after that, we talk about Napoleon. But we're not worried about all that. We are worried about the 1792 war, which took place during the time of the Legislative Assembly. Thank you so much. I'm Mr. Muso.